50 years ago this fall, I was ordained a minister. And that first fall, that first Sunday of October, 50 years ago, I celebrated with the church World Communion Sunday. And I want to tell you, for 50 years, it's been one of my favorite Sundays of the whole year. I love World Communion Sunday. A lot of times when we came to the point in the church here that we celebrate this day, we would gather from the congregation, if it were possible, or maybe even from the community, various people to help us celebrate this day. We would have people who could speak Spanish and German and Italian and other kinds of languages, and they would share in reading of the scriptures and the prayers. We would have various colors around the table, various nationalities and languages. Sometimes even we had different colored bread on the table. In Lafayette, Indiana, we didn't have to look very far for help to celebrate World Communion Sunday because there was a Vietnamese family in the congregation. They were already there when I came. The church had sponsored this family. Benjamin, and Rebecca. Now, those are not the names they got in Vietnam. Those are the names that the Americans gave them because nobody could pronounce their name. So they became Rebecca and Benjamin. Rebecca and Ben, the last name Pham, P-H-A-M. That was easy. They had 5 children. Beautiful family. Rebecca had been the secretary in Vietnam of General Creighton Abrams, who was the leading general of the U.S. forces during the second half of that conflict. And Ben had been a colonel in the South Vietnamese army. If you, I don't know if any of you have been watching the Vietnam PBS. Have any of you been watching that? That's an amazing. We watched it last night, the end of it. When it was over, my wife and I could hardly talk. It's such a powerful story. And we're not going to watch it again because the emotional impact of that thing is so great on us. We just want to leave it there. We don't want to try to do it the second time. Rebecca was, I don't know if you'll remember, but there was a helicopter that left, pictures of the helicopter leaving the roof of the American embassy. The last helicopter to leave, evacuating the Vietnamese people who wanted to evacuate, where the North Vietnamese army was coming in. Rebecca was on that helicopter, the last one to leave the American embassy. And the family was, nobody knew where anybody was. They were gone to the wind. They were all scattered somewhere. And Rebecca ended up in a camp in Arkansas, refugee camp. And wouldn't you know that they all found each other? It was a miracle. Can you imagine the joy that family must have experienced as one by one they each discovered, we're all here. The church in Lafayette sponsored a family through Catholic Relief or whatever, and they ended up coming to Lafayette, Indiana, and I came there as pastor. The Phams were already there. This is what they told me. They said, the story, Rebecca, who was the best English speaker among the group at that time, came to the church and said, we want to join the church. And the church said, no, we did not bring you here so that you would change your religion. You don't have to join the church. And Rebecca said, no, you need to understand. We want to love the world the way you have loved us. We want to become Christians. And they joined the church. They were there when I came. Christmas Eve every year, there'd be a knock on our door. I knew who it was, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It would be Ben and Rebecca. And she would be holding in her hands Vietnamese egg rolls, because she knew that I loved those egg rolls more than almost anything else on earth. And Rebecca would say, "May we just come in for a moment?" And they would come into our living room and sit down, and we would chat just for a few moments. Her family and those egg rolls were the best Christmas present I have ever received in my life. Ever. They were such a beautiful family. And they taught us what it was like, what it looked like to be Christians in the world. You know, we Americans, we like to go away somewhere else, don't we? We like to go to these other countries. We like to go to places like Nicaragua or Malawi or whatever. Because, if you've ever had this experience, you know what I'm talking about. Because of the richness of the Christian faith and the church in places like that. It's in places where people have almost nothing to live on. But you go into their worship services and you experience the singing and the joy of their worship. They have nothing to live on, but they have so much to live from. They almost make us ashamed to be the frozen chosen Presbyterians of the United States. They are so rich. They have so much to give. No wonder the church in Africa is growing so fast. Churches in other parts of the world are struggling. They have so much to give. So, our churches today who are trying to find our life in North America, we come to this day called World Communion Sunday, and we're given the story, appropriately so, that Jesus tells in the gospel that we read this morning, the parable of the 2 sons. I read the introduction to that. The story, the introduction, is that Jesus has left the rural safety of Galilee and has come now to the temple in Jerusalem, and he's on hostile ground. Not safe to be there. He's teaching a small group of people in the temple when all of a sudden they are visited by the chief priests and the elders. Now, I can imagine that when the chief priests and the elders walk into this teaching moment that Jesus is having in the temple, that they're all business. I can see the body language of the way they're walking in to confront Jesus, and they are all business. And one of them says to Jesus, and if I were been one of the people in the crowd being taught, I'd be scared to death. I'd want out of there as fast as I can. Says to Jesus, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you the authority?" Now, some people think Jesus was meek and mild. You know, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. And if Jesus had been meek and mild, I think what he would have probably done was say, Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anything. I was just with my friends for a moment here, and I'll just be on my way. We'll see you all later. That's not what he did at all, because Jesus was anything but meek and mild. What he did is tell a parable. The parable goes like this. There was a father who had 2 sons. He says to the first son, "Son, go into the field and get to work." And the son says, "Are you kidding? I'm busy." Goes off. Goes to the second son. "Son, get into the field and go to work." And he salutes and says, "Yes, sir, I'm on my way right now." But what happens is, the first son has a change of mind. And he goes into the field and works. And the second son, who gave the salute and said, "Yes, sir, I'm going to go," never shows up. And so Jesus says to the chief priests and the elders, which one did the Father's will? It's not a difficult question, is it? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. And so I'm sure that the chief priests and the elders were quite angry, having to give the answer. The one who did the Father's will is the one who's faithful. Whereupon Jesus says to them, "The tax collectors and the prostitutes are going to get into the kingdom ahead of you." Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. I don't think they were just angry. I think if they could have, if they had had the opportunity and the crowd hadn't been there and they had the opportunity, they would have killed Jesus right then and there. He's always doing that. Have you noticed that that's what the Lord does? We have these lines in the ground. Us and them. The good, the bad. The deserving, the undeserving. And when Jesus shows up, the lines somehow disappear. I love that story in Mark's Gospel. I guess maybe even Jesus has it, but I looked it up in Mark's Gospel. Of the time that Jesus is invited by Levi, who may be the same person as Matthew, we're not exactly sure, invited by Levi to his house. Levi is a tax collector. Okay? And he invites Jesus to his house for dinner. Now, there's a line here for everyone but Jesus. For him, there is no line. And he shows up. And Mark's Gospel says that there were many tax collectors and sinners at the house. You could hardly walk from the kitchen to the living room. It was packed. Jesus was the magnet. They were all there because Jesus was there. Every kind of sinner imaginable. What kind of sinner are you? Your kind was there. What kind of sinner are you? Your kind my kind, every kind of sinner was there. They were all there. And what's going on? You've got to see this scene. You've got to capture this, my friend. Jesus is sitting there and he's receiving from the hands of sinners, the dirty hands of sinners. He's receiving bread and he's passing it on. And he's laughing because someone has told the joke that's going around the village, and it's a funny one, and Jesus is laughing with everybody else. And he catches the eye of the woman who's serving the food all around the room, and he tells her what a good cook she is. He's having a blast with the tax collectors and the sinners. Now, some people would say, oh yeah, Jesus had this ability. They would say, yeah, Jesus has this ability. You know, he was able to see people the way they looked from God's eyes. He was able to look at someone and see through all of the failures, all of the sin, all of the mistakes, and he was able to see them as they came from the hand of God. Jesus had that ability. That's why he was there. Okay, maybe he had that. Maybe that's the way he did it. But I have another thought. I think Jesus was there because he needed what they had to give him. I think Jesus was there because he could not be complete. The perfect representation of God's life in the world, Jesus Christ, God's perfect representation of human life, needed what they had to offer him. That his heart could not be full without them. That his soul could not sing without them. That his joy could not be complete without them. Isn't that a revolutionary thought? The world doesn't act like that at all, does it? We are an alternative presence in the world. We are different. We do not think and act the way the world thinks and acts. For in the world, the person who is unlike me is a threat. The person who is unlike me is a danger. And so the history of the world, what is that? It's the history of one genocide, one war, one exclusion after another, where people who are unlike are killed, are segregated, or ignored because they are a threat. But Jesus was the life of the party. And sat there at the dinner, receiving all of the gifts that were there to be offered from the tax collectors and the sinners. Who do you need? Who do you need? Who do you need? I need you. My life can never be full, complete without God's people in my life, and I need you. I need you. I need your smile. I need your hug. I need your encouragement. I need your forgiveness when I do wrong. I need your presence. I come alive when I'm near you. I need you. I need you and you and you. And we need them and them and them, and way over there we need them for our life to sing, for our hearts to be full, for our lives to be complete. And so we gather to celebrate God's love for the world and our love for the world. Amen.